Hi, I'm Mark Skelsey, editor at downsizing.com.au. Now, last week, the Property Council of Australia released its annual Retirement Living Census. This is a snapshot of what's happening in the retirement village industry across Australia. There's many interesting stats in there about changes that are going on, about what's working, maybe what's not in the retirement village industry. And I'm very excited that joining us here today is Tony Massaro. He's a partner at PwC. He puts puts the report together for the Property Council. And Tony, welcome to downsizing.com.au.
Thank you very much, Mark.
Great. So look, when we all started the COVID journey back in 2020, there was a big question mark as to how the retirement village industry would respond. And from looking at this retirement village census, there's some stats in there which tell us what the outcome was. Can you just let us know a little bit more about those stats?
Absolutely, Mark. And so just setting the stage there, I think the reality is that one thing that COVID did, there's a lot of bad about COVID, but one thing that COVID did, particularly for our industry, is actually show how good this industry is, right? And so some of the stats that we have, that we gathered this year show that 39% of operators state that their sales have increased since COVID. Another 38% state that their sales have stayed the same throughout COVID. So 77% of operators are saying, look, COVID has actually either improved or not affected our business in the number of sales at all. And I know we spoke the other day and talking about how, but it's a good thing. I think it's important to understand and categorize that COVID really in of itself isn't good, but what it did is it showed how good our industry is, right? You would have moms and dads who were, unfortunately, because of either localized or state border controls, their loved ones couldn't get to them to help them maybe with their weekly grocery shopping. And you see the manager, the village manager of the villages becomes like a surrogate son or daughter who is providing great services in. And as you know, the industry is one that very much relies on word of mouth. So that gets around how good it has been. And it really, so anecdotally, what happens is we're seeing more people are considering retirement as an option sooner than maybe they would have before. So we were seeing an increase of couples that are coming in. Previously, you might have a single say, okay, I'm going to wait to go there until, my husband, who doesn't want to go in a retirement village, passes away or goes into nursing care, and then maybe I'll move in. We're seeing an increase of couples moving in. And just generally, anecdotally, and both anecdotally and the evidence shows us that there is an increase in sales happening.
And look, the thing about this census is there's stats everywhere. You go from the top of the tail of the industry, so you learn everything about it. But I guess another key stat that I saw as well is the other thing at the start of COVID. If we all remember, there were these dire predictions about how the real estate market was going to collapse. 30% were some of the figures I saw, and as we all know, that hasn't occurred. In fact, the house prices have been surging, and there's some interesting stats in there about what this actually means, that if you're moving as you are from a house and into a retirement village unit, are you getting more bang for your buck? What does the census show in this area?
Yeah, so Mark, that's actually an area that this year is very much a good news story for retirees who own their own home and are looking to move into a retirement village. So the kind of headline stat is that on average, a 2-bedroom ILU, independent living unit, costs 55% of a house in the same median house price in the same postcode. So what you're looking at, that figure moved down from 67% last year on the whole, right? So that's across all of Australia. But what that means is if you are a retiree and you're going to get $100 for your house, on average, you'll get to be able to buy in the same postcode a 2-bedroom ILU for $55,000. Very, very good news. Now, probably driven, as much as we like to say, hey, we've made them so much more affordable from a retirement perspective, That is not the case. The price hasn't gone down. It's just that the resi prices have taken off so much. But this is another credit to the retirement industry. The cumulative average growth rate over the last 5 years of a 2-bedroom ILU has grown at a pretty steady 4% per year. So right now, the new figure this year is on average $484,000 across is what your average 2-bedroom is costing you. Last year was $463,000. So by practicing restraint, the industry has done several things. Number one, it has insulated current residents from the anxiety of, oh, I hope I don't have to move out of my retirement village in a bad year, because then my unit's going to be worth a lot less. It's stabilized the whipsaw of ups and downs. And so, yes, it didn't increase 30% like some resi houses have, but it's gone up that steady amount. So that gives residents peace of mind. It also keeps it affordable, which is a really important point for a number of our residents coming in. And it also, for new residents that are coming in here, they're not so worried about timing it as well, like from a price perspective. They want to move into a village when the time is right. Now, other data that we have on people exiting villages show us that 44% of people leave to go into aged care. So, again, that's a good news story that there's a steady increase from a price perspective, so that they're not going to feel like they've really lost out in a market that might be changing.
Yeah, and an interesting perspective that we are dealing with slightly different sectors, residential and retirement living. I mean, I think the other thing that you and I know, we both work in this industry, is there's lots of sort of pronouncements about different types of dwellings, and there's often statements that it's all about land lease communities these days and retirement villages. Who knows as much? But the stats that come out from this year are very clear that the occupancy levels have gone up, and it does appear, going back to those COVID stats, that people are keen to go there. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're seeing with occupancy in 2021?
Absolutely. So as a whole, occupancy has risen. Last year was 87%. Now, from the data set that we have, it's 90%. So that a full 3% occupancy in a single year, massive move. And we now have the data set this year was the largest ever. So we had 77,000 units represented in that data. So very positive occupancy trend from last year, which is a great outcome for the industry.
And to that point, often there's a discussion about what sort of retirement village units are being built. The stats that I saw as well are very, very clear. This trend towards vertical living, it just is not going away anytime soon. What I can see there, and as well, I think probably you and I were both surprised. Suddenly a huge development pipeline has emerged as well. So, what are you hearing from the industry about what is popular with consumers and what's coming down the line?
Absolutely, Mark. So you're 100% correct there. We are seeing a surge in vertical. Now, this is not new only this year, but for instance, of all new development villages that are taking place, 41% are vertical or multi-level, and another 18% are combinations. So there might be some elements of vertical in them. Very different than 10 or 15 years ago when we saw almost no vertical here. And partially that's driven by just availability of land, right? The government doesn't want to keep pushing roads further and further out, big roads, and running then water and services infrastructure. So there's a lot around doing an infill program. Additionally, residents like to be in their communities. So if they can, they prefer to stay where they go to their grocery store that they like, they go to their doctor that they like, they go to their church if they're religious, and close to their children. So the vertical living has very much taken hold here in Australia. On your point around, and interesting, I say that here in Australia because vertical villages have been the mainstay in the US, for example, for many, many years. I have 40-year-old vertical villages in my portfolio that I used to run in the US. So you definitely get a number of different styles, and verticals very much taken an upswing in Australia. Mm-hmm. On the development units, again, a good news story. Now, if we look at penetration rates, and you can argue the penetration rate it goes to the definition of what you include in that. But if we just keep the penetration rate, whether it's 6% or 10% here in Australia, level, we are struggling to meet the supply of units that are needed, given the demographics of people simply turning the age of 75. 75 is our average entry age. And in the past, when we looked at development, there has been, on average, we look at a 3-year window going forward, and we've gotten results of normally 2,000 a year are planned for development. So on average, 6,000 planned over the next 3 years. This year, we have a much bigger amount. That's actually 10,000. So really, really good. And that most of that is back-ended. And I would say part of the driver for that really is that during COVID, in fact, development wasn't able to progress as fast as possible, right? Not only did you have the restrictions keeping workers off of sites, but the councils trying to assess the DAs, they would also, hey, people aren't here, we're struggling to get people in, so things took longer. So I think part of that is a little bit of a back-ended planned development that people are like, right now, as we get started, we're going to dig in and do that.
So it's interesting, I think, isn't it, if you're thinking about a retirement, you may be 65, you may be 60, you may be thinking ahead, knowing there's a lot of new stock coming onto the market is something that people may find very interesting, and more than likely that new stock will be vertical or apartment style stock. So that's what's Absolutely. Happening. Just in terms of a final question, the other thing I drew, it was very clear from reading the opportunities that people, was you interviewed the retirement living industry about what opportunities are coming up. It's very clear to me that care, everyone saw care as a huge opportunity off the back of the Aged Care Royal Commission. So again, we talk about another trend that's not going away: co-location care services. It strikes me these industries are coming together very quickly, aren't they, Tony?
Absolutely, Mark. And there are a number of operators that have separate businesses, which are the provision of home care. There are a number of operators that are blending models. You look at that new LDK model, which is fascinating. And that's kind of like, is it aged care? No. Is it retirement? No. It's kind of retirement where they're delivering home care in their facility. Interesting and very high uptake as well. So I agree with you that care is always something that you think about. And it's how do you get that provision of care, or even, interestingly enough, sometimes just to know that it is there, because all residents don't always tap into those adjacencies as needed, right? When you see a co-located aged care and retirement facility, you think, oh, that's going to be filled with all these people from the retirement village. It actually isn't normally the case. It might be 10% of the people in that aged care, even though it's co-located, had been in the retirement village. So it's both the provision of care and the knowledge that it is there for both families and residents that I think is driving that confluence of the two.
Yeah. So look, Tony, you and I could probably talk all day about this census. There's every stat known to man, pets, women, everyone about retirement villages in there. I think, although it is probably prepared for the industry, there are lots of stats if you're looking at a different pricing model, if you're looking at selling a unit, if you're looking at different locations, there are things that people draw out of it, and downsizing at .com.au will continue to analyse some of the outcomes. So thank you very much for talking to us about this today, and great report. So thank you very much, Tony.
You're most welcome. Thank you, Mark.